Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. The Battle of Stalingrad, August 23, 1942. February 2, 1943, was the greatest turning point of World War II, and also one of the bloodiest tragedies in human history, with a total of 1,798,619 casualties. With ambitions to dominate the Eastern Front, Hitler ordered the capture of Stalingrad at all costs, believing that controlling the city named after Stalin would be the decisive blow to the Soviet Union. But Stalingrad quickly turned into a living hell. Every street, every house, even every basement became a battlefield. The Soviet Red Army fought to the last breath, while the German army was tightly surrounded in the harsh winter, suffering from hunger, cold, and incessant shelling. When the siege closed, more than 300,000 German soldiers were trapped, and most never returned. The defeat at Stalingrad was not only a fatal military blow, but also a crushing blow to the spirit of the entire Nazi Empire. From the ruins of Stalingrad, the Soviet Union rose strongly, and the wheel of victory began to turn, bringing the war to a fiery and bloody end for Nazi Germany. The Siege of Berlin, April 16th to May 2nd, 1945, was the fiery end of World War II in Europe, where blood, smoke, and ashes mingled with the collapse of the Nazi Empire. With more than 1.29 million casualties, this was the final and bloodiest battle on the Eastern Front. After breaking through the Oder River defense line, the Soviet Red Army advanced like a storm, wiping out all remaining resistance, approaching Berlin at a speed of 40 kilometers per day. When only 56 kilometers from the German capital, 3 Soviet forces simultaneously launched a full-scale attack from the east and south, destroying pockets of resistance, while the northern wing crushed the last German defense line. The sound of cannons echoed through the ruined streets, and Red Army tanks roared into the heart of the dying empire. Hitler holed up in his bunker, watching his dream of hegemony crumble to ashes, before taking his own life on April 30th, 1945. On the same day, the red flag of the Soviet Union flew over the German parliament building, Reichstag, symbolizing the victory of the Allies and the end of the fascist nightmare. The Battle of Moscow, October 2, 1941 to January 7, 1942, was one of the greatest turning points of World War II, with a total of 1 million casualties. In the autumn of 1941, Hitler threw the full might of the Wehrmacht into Operation Typhoon, firmly believing that the capture of Moscow would crush the Soviet spirit and force Stalin to surrender. Millions of German troops and thousands of tanks rushed towards the capital, destroying everything in their path. But they did not expect that the Soviet Red Army would fight to the end, turning each village and each street into an impregnable fortress. As the harsh winter set in, temperatures dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius. German tanks froze, guns stopped, and soldiers collapsed in the blizzard. In contrast, the Soviet Army, reinforced by Siberian divisions experienced in fighting in the cold, launched a fierce counterattack, pushing the Germans back from the gates of the capital. Moscow did not fall, and Hitler's fleeting dream melted into ice. The Battle of Moscow not only saved the Soviet Union from the brink of destruction, but also lit up hope for the entire world that was plunged into the darkness of fascism. The Battle of Narva, February 2nd to August 10th, 1944, was one of the fiercest and bloodiest battles on the Eastern Front, with a total of 550,000 casualties. Located on the Narva Isthmus, the strategic Estonian enclave became a fierce flashpoint between Nazi Germany, reinforced by Estonian volunteer units, and Stalin's Soviet Red Army. Both sides understood that whoever controlled Narva would hold the door to the Baltic. The battle was divided into 2 major phases. the Narva Bridge, and the Battle of the Tannenberg Line, where shells, tanks, and blood mixed in close combat of unprecedented ferocity. Villages around Narva were flattened, the sky reddened by relentless artillery fire. Despite a series of Red Army attacks, the Germans stubbornly held on until Hitler was forced to withdraw from Estonia in August 1944. The Battle of Narva was not only a tragedy of hundreds of thousands of lives, but also a symbol of the despair of two exhausted powers in the throes of war. The Battle of France, May 10th to June 25th, 1940, was a lightning nightmare that stunned Europe and marked the abrupt end of the phenomenal war, the first quiet period of World War II. In less than 2 months, 469,000 soldiers were killed or wounded, and one of the most powerful armies in the world at the time, the French army, completely collapsed. On May 10, 1940, Nazi Germany launched a lightning offensive through the Ardennes forest, which the Allies believed was impassable for tanks. Using Blitzkrieg tactics, lightning warfare, the German army poured across the border, broke through the defense lines, and advanced straight to Paris with a speed that shocked the world. Although the two sides were nearly evenly matched, the French army was paralyzed by poor communications, chaotic command, and a false belief in the Maginot Line. By the end of June, a swastika flag was flying over Paris, a symbol of one of the most humiliating defeats in European military history. The Battle of France not only changed the course of the war, but also ushered in a dark period for the entire continent. The Battle of Luzon, January 9th to August 15th, 1945, was one of the fiercest and bloodiest campaigns in the Pacific, with an estimated total of 332,000 to 345,000 casualties. The island of Luzon, the largest and most important of the Philippines, held a strategic position vital to the U.S. military in its plan to retake the Pacific. After months of waiting, in early 1945, General Douglas MacArthur, who had vowed, "I will return," finally fulfilled his promise with a massive amphibious landing on Luzon. The battle quickly turned into a living hell as the Japanese desperately fought back at all costs, including using kamikaze pilots to crash into U.S. warships. By February 11th, the U.S. had captured the capital, Manila, but the city had been severely devastated, with tens of thousands of civilians killed in the sea of fire. Despite the main force being defeated, the remaining Japanese troops still held out in the mountains and forests, conducting sporadic counterattacks that lasted for many months. Luzon became a symbol of the brutality, bravery, and terrible price that both sides paid in the final days of World War II. The Second Battle of Kharkov, May 12 to May 28, 1942, was one of the bloodiest tragedies of the Soviet Red Army in World War II. The city of Kharkov, Ukraine's leading industrial and strategic center, fell to Nazi Germany in the fall of 1941. Determined to regain this land, the Soviet Union launched a large-scale attack in May 1942 in the hope of turning the tide of the battle. However, they did not expect that the German army still had terrible latent power, along with the ability to counterattack sophisticatedly and brutally. In less than 2 weeks, 3 Soviet armies were surrounded and destroyed. More than 280,000 soldiers and 650 tanks were completely wiped out. The sky of Kharkov was filled with smoke and bullets. The ground turned into a giant cemetery. The battle ended in a major disaster for the Soviet Union and became a bitter lesson in strategic errors, but also a painful stepping stone for the growth of the Red Army in the following years. The Battle of Kursk, July 5th to August 23, 1943, is considered the largest tank battle in human history and the decisive turning point on the Eastern Front of World War II. After the disastrous defeat at Stalingrad, Hitler recklessly launched an operation to wipe out the Kursk salient, the protruding territory controlled by the Soviet Union, in the hope of regaining the initiative. But the Red Army had anticipated every move of Germany thanks to its excellent intelligence system, and prepared a defense line up to 185 kilometers deep, dense with minefields, obstacles, and anti-tank fire points. When the operation began on July 5, 1943, thousands of tanks roared into each other in a sea of fire and gunpowder smoke, creating an unprecedented scene of horror. After more than a month of fierce fighting, the German forces were exhausted, counterattacked, and forced into a defensive position. 388,000 casualties were the bloody price they had to pay. Kursk buried Hitler's last hope in the east, and from here, the balance of war tilted towards the Soviet Union, opening the way for a counteroffensive to sweep fascism from Europe. The Battle of the Bulge, December 16, 1944, January 25, 1945. Also known as the Battle of the Bulge, was the last desperate counteroffensive of Nazi Germany on the Western Front of World War II. With the ambition of dividing the Allies, capturing the port of Antwerp and turning the tide of the war, Hitler threw more than 200,000 troops and thousands of tanks into the frozen Ardennes forest of Belgium. This lightning attack stunned the Allies, creating a terrible shock in the cold winter of 1944. But when the surprise wore off, the Allies' logistical strength and fighting spirit quickly turned the tide. After more than a month of bloody fighting, the Ardennes campaign collapsed completely, leaving more than 186,000 casualties and turning the last hope of Nazi Germany into ashes. The Battle of the Bulge not only marked the end of Hitler's dream, but also paved the way for the fall of Berlin just months later. The Battle of Monte Cassino, January 17th to May 18th, 1944, was one of the bloodiest and fiercest confrontations of World War II, with an estimated total of 185,000 casualties. Located in the rugged mountains of southern Italy, this place became a solid fortress of the German-Italian coalition, blocking the Allied advance on the road to Rome. During the 4 months of fighting, every hill and every wall of the ancient monastery of Monte Cassino was eroded by bombs and blood. The Allies' goal was to break through the Gustav Line, the German defense line considered impregnable, to open the way to liberate the capital Rome. When the smoke and fire subsided, the Allies finally won. But that victory came at a terrible price, with tens of thousands of soldiers falling, and an ancient monastery thousands of years old being leveled in a sea of fire. Monte Cassino is forever remembered as a symbol of resilience, but also a deep wound in human history. Amidst the bustle of a United Service Organization, USO, event circa 1943, a woman in a bikini gracefully walks among the ranks of smiling and amused American servicemen. Performances and entertainment like this were organized by the USO to ease the war fatigues, bringing joy and optimism to American soldiers serving in World War II. 3 young women, Janice Cooper, Marilyn Connor, and Gloria Ellickson, attracted all eyes while sunbathing at Steeplechase Park on Coney Island, New York, in the 1940s. What was special was that they wore unique swimsuits made from World War II Air Force escape maps, a meaningful gift from their pilot boyfriends. The image was both sexy, daring, and full of wartime imprints of a turbulent period. Although World War II caused countless forms of destruction, the devastation caused by the atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, was the most catastrophic. United States officials debated whether to use the bomb. Ultimately, they justified its use on the grounds that it was a necessary evil, as well as the fact that if they did not drop such a devastating device, the Japanese would continue to fight to the last man, ultimately leading to more death and destruction. After the bomb was dropped, approximately 12.2 square kilometers, 4.7 square miles, of Hiroshima city were destroyed, with buildings reduced to irreparable rubble. The force of the explosion also immediately caused a series of fierce fires, quickly burning down any houses that were lucky enough to remain standing. Although World War I was technically the first major war fought in the industrial age, World War II brought with it a much more powerful array of weapons. These modern guns, tanks, and explosives were deafening to both the users and the recipients, and many soldiers suffered permanent hearing loss as a result. Due to the indiscriminate and sustained nature of much of the bombing during World War II, even those who tried their best to find shelter at the beginning of a raid often failed to act quickly enough. Such was the case with the passengers on this London bus. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. Of course, the vast majority of deaths in World War II occurred on the battlefield or in concentration camps, but there were other ways to die as well. As the war began to draw to an inevitable end, and it became clear that the Allies would win, many German officials, such as Ernst Lissow, chose suicide rather than face almost certain execution by the Allies for their war crimes. With seemingly endless bombing campaigns reducing cities to rubble, those fortunate enough not to see combat live in constant fear of death. Pictured above are British schoolchildren taking part in an air raid drill. Neither the wooden desks nor the way they position their hands would offer much protection if hit by a German bomb. While most schoolchildren cowered under their desks during air raids, adults who were out during a terrorist attack often had to run to the nearest tube station to minimize their risk of death. Like these Londoners during a German air raid, while the tube offered a relatively high level of protection, those who took shelter there could still be confined to their new tube homes for days, with bombs occasionally penetrating shallower parts of the station. In February 1942, in Singapore, Britain's impregnable citadel in the Far East, British, Australian, and Indian soldiers were forced to surrender to the Japanese army after days of fierce fighting. In their mud-stained uniforms, they silently bowed their heads before the enemy's guns. This event marked the most humiliating defeat in British military history, with more than 80,000 soldiers taken prisoner, and paved the way for Japan to control all of Southeast Asia at the height of World War II. In the final days of World War II, Hitler desperately relied on the fledgling youth force from the Hitler Youth, turning them into reluctant soldiers on the bloody battlefield. In the photo, he appears with a cold gaze, gently touching the face of a boy who had just been awarded a medal, as if to instill blind faith in them. These young faces, not yet 20 years old, were caught up in the vortex of propaganda, becoming human shields for a regime about to collapse. This is a tragic testament to the exploitation of youth in the frenzy of war. In the dimly lit train station, a sailor hurriedly gave his lover a passionate farewell kiss before the train rolled away. The girl stood on tiptoe, hugging him tightly through the train window, as if holding on to the last bit of warmth in the short moment. All around, silent eyes watched, filled with sympathy. The photo captured not only a farewell kiss, but also a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the pain of separation in war, where every encounter could be the last. This chilling photograph captures the moment women in a Nazi concentration camp faced death. A female prisoner calmly walked to the gallows, while the bodies of others dangled behind her. Her resigned gaze contrasted sharply with the SS officer's cold demeanor. No crying, no lamentation, just the eerie silence of evil and the ultimate human tragedy. Amidst the flames of war, this moment was like a ray of light in the darkness. The American soldier hugged his lover tightly in his arms, kissing her passionately right before going into battle. Behind him were his comrades laughing and joking, but in their eyes there was fear and separation. A kiss between life and death, between love and war, where their hearts still burned even though the world around them was collapsing. This disturbing photograph captures the moment after World War II, when a French woman had her head shaved in public as punishment for allegedly collaborating or having relations with occupying German soldiers. Her face is blank, her eyes blank with shame and hatred, while those around her look on indifferently. The images reveal a dark chapter, where honor and revenge collided with post-war rage. This haunting photograph captures the moment when German women, often called Trümmerfrauen, labored amid the rubble of World War II. They passed each brick from hand to hand, rebuilding the country from the ashes of war. There were no soldiers, no buildings, just gaunt hands and determined eyes. In the devastation, these women laid the foundations for a reborn Germany.